Last Friday, on the last day of open enrollment, a federal judge out of the state of Texas struck down the Affordable Care Act and deemed it unconstitutional. Now, according to the New York Times, the federal judge struck down the entire Affordable Care Act on the grounds that its mandate requiring people to buy health insurance is unconstitutional and the rest of the law cannot stand without it. So this is important to keep in mind. The fact that congressional Republicans successfully repealed the federal mandate, which essentially forced individuals to buy private insurance or they would get penalized later. Now, in doing so, in repealing that part of the Affordable Care Act, that kind of opened the doors for a federal judge like this one to deem the law different and therefore unconstitutional. And the reason why I say different is because the Affordable Care Act has actually withstood several legislative challenges, and the Supreme Court has upheld the Affordable Care Act on 2 different occasions. Now, when the Supreme Court upheld the mandate as constitutional back in 2012, it was based on Congress's taxing power. Congress, the court said, could legally impose a tax penalty on people who do not have health insurance. But once Congress repeals the mandate, well then, the law is up for a different interpretation, which is what happened here. Now, Judge Reed O'Connor said that the individual mandate requiring people to have health insurance can no longer be sustained as an exercise of Congress's tax power. And finally, the judge said that he would not parse the ACA's provisions one by one, but had to invalidate the whole law, including the expansion of Medicaid and the requirement for employers to offer coverage to workers. So this really puts all of the protections of the Affordable Care Act in jeopardy. Now, of course, Democrats are planning to appeal this decision. They plan on fighting back. And for the moment being, the law will remain in place the way that it is. However, if it goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court strikes it down, that means no more protections against private insurers dropping you for pre-existing conditions, no more caps for out-of-pocket expenses. Your children can't remain on their parents' insurance until the age of 26 anymore. So there are all sorts of protections that made the Affordable Care Act a mixed bag. Now, it forced you to buy private insurance, which is a huge downside, but the protections would go away if the Supreme Court strikes this down.
So I want to be clear about this because unfortunately, as usual, the rest of the media won't be. But the first part they're clear about, the second part I'm worried about. So who wanted to take away all these different provisions? It's absolutely clear. The Republican attorney generals in all these different states sued to make sure that you are not covered if you have a pre-existing condition. Another one that we didn't mention is annual and lifetime limits on coverage will be permitted again. So if you have cancer, but your insurance has a limit, 250,000, 500,000, a million, whatever it is, and your surgery is taking too long, your chemotherapy is taking too long, your treatment overall is taking too long. Oh, well, it costs too much money. Well, what happens after that? I ran into my lifetime cap, so what happens? Well, what happens next is you die. We don't give you any more money, and you go ahead and die. That was the old system before Obamacare. Now, the Republicans said, we want to go back to that system. It wasn't something that you could argue. It wasn't, hey, can you really parse out what their intention is? No, they went to court to take away these provisions, to end the Affordable Care Act that protects you from those provisions, right? So they're very clearly 100% responsible for all the things that will flow from that. The second person responsible is Donald Trump. He's like, well, he desperately wanted to kill Obamacare, so you would be at the mercy of his donor class again, with the insurance companies, the drug companies, etc. Well, he couldn't kill it through legislative means, so he said, all right, I'm gonna make the mandate so that you don't have to pay it, $0. Now that could theoretically be a good thing, but he knew the trick, not him personally, of course, he's an idiot, but his staffers did. And so then they bring it to a Republican judge, and this guy is appointed by George W. Bush, and he goes, oh, now technically, since the mandate doesn't cost anything, That's a loophole that allows me to say it's unconstitutional, even though the Supreme Court in 2012 said it was, but that's only because they charged you money and that was a tax and hence within their taxing power. Now that it's not within their taxing power, I can kill the whole bill. That was the whole intent. So Trump is responsible. I'm sure he's bragging about it now. We'll give you his quotes in a second, right? And then the third person responsible, obviously, is the Republican judge that killed this provision. Now, as Anna said, it's not the law of the land yet. It gets appealed up. There'll be, it'll go to the circuit court, and then it likely will eventually go to the Supreme Court. But if the Republicans succeed in this, what I don't want is the mainstream media coming out and going, oh, well, now you can be, do you know that there's 133 million Americans with pre-existing conditions? So you'll all be subject to being denied again or paying higher rates again and being bankrupted when you can't pay your health insurance bills, right? And then when we know who did it, it will be 100% because of the Republicans. The media will go, I can't tell, I don't know. Later, Trump said that he wanted to protect you from pre-existing conditions. He didn't, he did the opposite, but he said it, so I'm gonna say he said, she said. No, there's no he said, she said here. The Republicans, they should own it. Look, I was gonna say they're guilty, but if apparently they don't think they're guilty, they're celebrating today. Let's note all the people celebrating today that you might have to be denied again because of a pre-existing condition, that you might have a lifetime cap, and all these monstrous provisions are coming back. And all those Republicans are celebrating on rooftops today.
So they might be celebrating privately, but publicly, many congressional Republicans are remaining quiet because they understand how unpopular this really is with the American people. Now, that's not to say that the American people love the Affordable Care Act, but if you look at the specific protections that it offers, of course the public loves that. I mean, and look, this is a testament to what happens when you pass legislation that's flimsy. And what I mean by that is, look, Democrats got the messaging wrong. Democrats got the policy wrong because, again, it was a huge handout to private insurance companies. It was complicated, it was difficult to understand. We work in this industry. We read about this stuff every day. We research this stuff every day. I still didn't know about every protection that the Affordable Care Act gave us. I'll give you an example. I didn't know that there were caps on out-of-pocket expenses, right? And so I didn't learn that until this year when my husband had surgery. The surgery alone cost $40,000. That's what the doctor charged. That's not including anesthesia, right? But there's a cap on how much I pay out of pocket thanks to the Affordable Care Act. If it weren't for that, I don't know how much I would have ended up spending out of pocket. So that is a protection that's important for a lot of people, myself included, right? The protections for pre-existing conditions, all those things needed to be messaged more effectively to the American people. But you know what? If Democrats are terrible at messaging, which they are, they could have gotten in front of this issue by just passing universal health care, by fighting for universal health care. That way you don't leave the door open for Republicans to come in and slowly but surely dismantle your big shining achievement.
Yeah, so look, we're fair here. We criticize Democrats and Republicans, but for the things they should be criticized for. And we do not call it even just because there's a neutrality fetish or that Republicans or someone else is going to yell at us. We don't care about that, so we care about the facts. So the Affordable Care Act has problems. It does not have adequate price controls. It's what we said from day one. From day one, we said it should have had a public option. Now we believe Medicare for all is the right option. And you know what? If you Republicans, you're celebrating taking away Affordable Care Act. If this ruling holds, be careful what you wish for, because progressives 100% will fight for Medicare for all next, and we pulled the Democratic Party in that direction. Already 70% of the American people agree with us, so we will get you much better protections than what even Obamacare offered. But if they say that the Democrats and Republicans, you cannot tell who was for denying you based on pre-existing conditions, the caps and all the things that we've outlined here, if the press makes that mistake, which they often do, that's nothing but aiding and abetting a lie and Republican propaganda. For all the criticism we lay on the Democrats, they definitely were for these provisions.
Yes.
No ands, ifs, or buts. So if you like those provisions, they should get all of the credit. Almost every Republican voted against it, has tried to repeal it over 50 times, and now use this trick in the courts to try to take it away from them and are now celebrating that you're now going to be subject to over-the-top, insane, what they call free market capitalism, which is go ahead and die on a street corner and we don't give a damn about you.
One final thing I want to add to this story is commentary, essentially, by Politico. They wouldn't deem it commentary, but it is. So this is an article written by Caitlin Prisco, and toward the end of her piece, she says the following: Democrats who grabbed 40 new seats in this year's midterms, in large part by relying on a message of healthcare, have not shown an appetite for crafting a new law, vowing instead to fight Friday's ruling. So Caitlin, you write for Politico. As a political reporter, you should do a little research, because there are Democrats, many of whom are freshman Democrats in Congress, who are fighting for a different type of healthcare law. It's called Medicare for All, and you should look into it. I mean, how do you not know that?
Yeah, now if she were to write instead, a lot of incoming Democrats and current progressives are for Medicare for All, but the Democratic leadership is skeptical about that and would like to have a smaller change or just protect the status quo. That would have been correct. That would have been accurate. But without that context, it makes it seem like there's no Democrats who actually want to fight for a better proposal. And that's not remotely true. And now, if you want to relate or write an article about how the Democratic leadership is trying to prevent Medicare for all, that's a super fair article. I would love to see that article, because that's true. But and Democratic leadership, they're going to show us either way, right? Because you're either going to put it up for a vote or you're not. You're either going to fight for it or you're not. We're going to tell you those facts no matter where they fall, okay? And one last thing, I promise you, Trump bragging, among the different things he bragged on Twitter about was, he said, as I predicted all along, Obamacare has been struck down as an unconstitutional disaster.
You don't even know what the Constitution contains, please.
Yeah, and then he says now Congress must pass a strong law that provides great health care and protects pre-existing conditions. Mitch and Nancy get it done, okay? Now, so he ruins it, he sets it on fire, and he did the trick again, as we told you, to say, oh, now you're not gonna have to pay any taxes on the mandate, which then undermined the whole law. Then after taking away all of your protections, he's like, we're gonna get strong healthcare. What's your counter proposal? Nothing. And then part of the reason I brought up that tweet is I want you to understand the next trick that's gonna happen. Because getting rid of pre-existing conditions is so popular in the country, Republicans pretend to be in favor of it. They are not, as we just explained. Any reporter that writes that the Republicans are in favor of keeping protections on pre-existing conditions is, again, they're just lying on behalf of the Republicans. They fully supported taking away those protections. They fully supported it. Did you support it or did you not support it? Don't tell me later you might bring back those protections, because you ended the protections in the first place. So that's point one. But when they come back and say, oh, we want pre-existing condition coverage, right? They're gonna say, now, in order to do that deal, we want a package that includes being able to sell health insurance across state borders and a whole Christmas tree of wish list of health insurance companies and drug companies. Why? Because that gets rid of regulation, that allows them to charge you even more and protect you even less. And they're gonna hold pre-existing conditions hostage for their demands to help the health insurance industry even more. I guarantee it, quote me now, hear me now, quote me later, and you will, I'll show you, that is exactly what the Republicans do. And I know I'm on a warpath, but I can't stand anymore the mainstream media calling it even. So here in this case, the first part they get right, the Republican Attorney General sue to make this happen. Then get the second part right. So the Republican Party is in favor of, at this point, repealing the protections that Americans say they overwhelmingly want. That is what they're in favor of, and that is what they celebrate today. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.